Good morning, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. In the essence of everyone's time, I'd like to welcome everybody. My name is Richard Schwar. I'm the Executive Director of the Ontario Charitable Gaming Association. Our organization provides support, advocacy, and information for charities and not-for-profits that fundraise through all forms of charitable gaming in the province of Ontario. We're pleased to partner again today on Giving Tuesday, great day, with the Canadian Postcode Lottery Foundation in another episode of our series of educational webinars. Before we begin, just a couple of quick reminders. This webinar is being recorded and will be shared for those that are unable to attend. Please don't be shy. We encourage everyone to turn on their cameras. Also, if you'd like to, in the chat, it's always interesting to see where everybody is from. So let us know what organization you represent and what part of the province of Ontario you're from. Gives us some good scope on who's all in attendance here today. If you have questions throughout the webinar, please use the Q&A feature. It's at the bottom middle of the Zoom software. You'll be able to ask a question, and then we'll moderate some questions near the end of today's webinar. And we'll also be using Kahoot. You'll see that in the chat there is a link to Kahoot, and there'll be just some quick survey questions to engage folks in some of the conversation here today. I'd like to now introduce the host of today's event, Judith Lingman from the Canadian Postcode Lottery Foundation. Over to you, Judith.
Thank you so much, Richard. And I would rather say co-host together with you and our guest speakers of today. But good morning, all of you. And it's really great to have so many people from all over Ontario joining us again. I think this is our fourth webinar for this year, and we are very excited to have two great speakers that I will introduce a little later. But briefly maybe about the Canadian Postcode Lottery Foundation for the ones who have not joined a previous webinar and haven't heard of us before. The foundation was established in 2023. So about 1.5 years ago, and our sole main goal is to strengthen the civil society in Ontario. So we're very happy with the representatives of this civil society charitable landscape today here gathered. And maybe a brief update, because one thing is the educational webinars, and you can strengthen organizations in many ways, but we're going to talk about it today. Financial backing is crucial for all kinds of initiatives, and that's what we really would like to start with coming year, because we would like to introduce a specific charitable lottery format that is already successfully operating in 5 European countries, in the Netherlands and in Great Britain and Sweden and Norway and Germany. And it would be fantastic if we could also start a postcode lottery in Ontario. And well, the past few years, we have been working very closely with the Ontario Charitable Gaming Association. They have helped us also in our talks with the Alcohol and Gaming Commission, because they are the ones who have to give us a license at some point, and we made great progress so far. So the foundation is eligible. We found ourselves a partner that is a game-related supplier who can help us operate this future lottery. And now it's like more the dots on the I, and we hope to launch in the spring of next year. If you're interested, at the end of this webinar, we will have a QR code, and you can register that once we launch, you can get the news will be out and you will be informed immediately. Well, now to the webinar. We did something already, and if you're interested, at the Canadian Postcode Lottery Foundation website, you can still see the previous webinars. We've been speaking about engaging volunteers. We have explored how to use AI in your work as a charity. But today we're going to talk about next year, so the trends of 2026. And we're super happy that we are today joined by Cian Murphy and Tim Harrison-Byrne from nfpResearch, and they will enlighten us because they did amazing job to talk with a lot of people in Canada as well, what we can expect from next year. But before I hand over, and it was already announced, we would like to get a little sense of your knowledge and whether you have a bit of the same feelings that the results of the research will be shown later. So if we can go to the Kahoot, we have a couple of questions, and it will be a poll, so we can see whether what you think of the following ones. And Maybe you can, if you're not already registered through the Kahoot QR code, we can do it collaboratively. Here is again, so you can use your device, go on to QR code and the game pin, and then you can also register with your name, I guess. Thank you, Paul, for helping out with this amazing technique. This is nice. Everybody's popping up. It's always, I think, with how many are we now? It's always good to see 42 people. I think we'll be joined by more because we had over 200 people registered, but maybe it's early. But this looks fantastic, everybody popping up. So shall we go to the first question? And that's also been asked in the panel that NFP have been working with. Here we go. The first question is, what percentage of the general public do you think has donated to a charity in the last 3 months? Percentage of the general public, and we are talking about Canada. Ooh, 37%. We're not going to reveal it. This is what you think, and Tim and Cian will enlighten us a little later. Over to the next question. Question number 2. What percentage, another percentage, of the general public do you think that they say they trust charities? How trustworthy does the public think that you are? Is there a large trust or not that much trust? Who think they trust charities in general? Ooh, okay, yeah, lots of people. Not we'll hear later. And then the third question: what percentage of the general public say have given more to charity over the last year? So it has increased compared to the year before. Are people giving more? What do you think? Okay, the 40%. Well, Key and Tim, you're keeping track, huh? And we have one final question that's more related to yourself and your charity, whether your charity is facing resourcing challenges at this time. Maybe no challenges, we hope for you. Maybe some challenges or many challenges. So give us a little bit sense of what position you are currently. Some challenges. I like that. Thank you so much. This gives us already a kind of a sense how you are in the match. With no further ado, I would like to hand over to Cian and Tim for the coming half hour. And again, please, if you have questions, put them in the chat. We have at least 10 minutes before we say goodbye to answer some more questions. But over to you, Tim and Cian. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Judith, and thank you very much, Richard, as well for hosting us. Got some interesting research findings here for you today, hopefully this morning. First of all, though, just want to kind of give you a bit of introduction to NFP in case you're wondering who are these people who've come and why are they talking at us. We are a market research agency. We're based in the UK, but we work across the UK, Ireland, Canada, and the US. We do a huge range of different types of research for the general public, or sorry, for charities, whether that's working with the general public or their stakeholders, qualitative and quantitative. But the findings today are from our NFP Public research, which is a survey we run twice a year with the Canadian general public. We sample 3,000 adults twice a year and ask them a huge range of different topics. Some questions about individual charity brands, and lots of questions that we think will be of interest to charities generally. So that's where the results will be coming from today. Because, of course, all of you are based in Ontario, we have decided to mostly show data from just Ontarian respondents. We thought initially it would be very interesting to try and compare people from Ontario to people from the rest of Canada. Unfortunately, what we found was that actually there was very, very little difference in attitudes. I don't know if that's surprising to anyone, but Ontarians turn out to be very, very representative of Canadians generally. So we will just be showing you mostly data from people from Ontario. Hopefully there'll be a few surprises in there. I think there will, based on the results from the poll. All will be revealed as we go through it. But hopefully we'll be giving you some of the most important findings that will indicate how you should be planning and thinking about the year ahead as we come to the end of 2025. So the first point is just a sense of where the public are at the moment. And, there is a feeling of optimism out there among the public, just about, but it's fragile. And that's very important for charities because we know what you're fundamentally doing is promising improvements and change for the better in society. And to be able to do that, you need to convince people that that's a realistic prospect. Um, so this is a question where we've asked the public, in general, do you think things in Canada are heading in the right direction or the wrong direction? These are results from people in Ontario. 40% say that things are going in the right direction, 34% in the wrong direction. You can see that's quite a shift from last year, and people were broadly thinking that things were going in the wrong direction in December 2024, and then we normally see when there is an election and a change in government or some sort of a chance for people to have their say. Optimism returns a little bit, and that's what we've seen here with 40% of people now saying that things are going in the right direction. So Canadians, and this is true of Canadians generally as well as people in Ontario, are broadly speaking slightly optimistic at the moment. And that's unusual compared to some of the markets that we work in. So this is the Canada public as a whole. If we look in the Irish market, actually 45% of people say things are going in the wrong direction, 37% in the right direction. So negative, but just about, not a huge gap. Whereas if you look at the UK, people are feeling very, very pessimistic indeed about the direction the country is going. So 57% say things are going in the wrong direction, compared to just 23 going in the right direction. And that was barely affected at all by the UK general election in 2024. So if you think things are gloomy and pessimistic in Canada, just be glad you're not on the other side of the Atlantic. So why does this matter? Why does it matter for charities whether people think things are going in the right direction or not? And as I said, it's fundamentally that you're in the business of selling a better future. You're in the business of saying that we can do something about the problems the country is facing, even if it's only one particular thing. We can change that and make things better. Um, and if the public are in a negative mood, a pessimistic mood, they don't really think that things have improved, it's very, very difficult to convince them that you can make anything different about that. So here we ask people about a range of different issues, and we ask them, thinking about the last 20 years, do you think things have gotten better or gotten worse for these issues or these groups of people? And we subtract the number of people who say that things have gotten worse from the number of people who say that things have gotten better. So we get a net positive or minus of whether things are improving or disimproving. The first thing to note is that most things fall below this dotted line, which we've put at 0. So in other words, for most of these issues, people think that things are getting worse. So I'm not sure why homelessness is in there twice. Possibly should be housing. Climate change, poverty in Canada, global poverty, access to healthcare, all of these things people think are getting worse. The only thing that people think are improving are gender equality, the rights of Indigenous people, animal rights, access to education, and just about human rights. So fundamentally, people are feeling pretty pessimistic at the moment. And we know that there's a really strong correlation as well between the proportion of people who think that something has improved in the past and the proportion that believe it will improve in the future. So if you want to explain to people that you can make a difference in, for example, climate change, that's very challenging at the moment because they think things have gotten worse. They think things are going to get worse in the future. And where do you fit into that? How can you convince them otherwise? So that's a challenge at the moment. I think when the public are feeling skeptical, it's interesting to ask the question of who is feeling that they're represented by charities. So this is a statement where we've asked the general public, again in Ontario, Canadian charities are representative of people like me. Do you agree or disagree with this statement? And you can see less than half, but still the largest proportion are saying that they do agree with this, so 43%. 35% neither agree nor disagree, and 17% are actually disagreeing with that statement. But it's interesting to dig into it a little bit more and say, okay, who are the people then who are saying that they feel represented, that the Canadian charities are, I suppose, in some sense, for people like them. And here we have a list of all of the significant differences among people across Canada. And we've put a dotted line down the middle here, which is where the general public falls. So in other words, the median person in Canada is somewhere around there. And then groups that feel more represented by charities are in various shades of blue, and groups that feel less represented are in various shades of orange or peach there. So unsurprisingly, donors are most likely to feel represented. That's, I think, not surprising. Regular worshippers as well. We know that people from all faiths who support charities tend to be quite strong in their support. People from a Muslim background, people from a Black background, supporters of the Liberal Party or Green Party, Christians, urban people, full-time people. This is the tribe, if you like, of people who feel that charities are representative of them. Then on the other hand, the group who feel less represented or less likely to agree with that statement, you have rural Canadians, people from a white background, those who don't have a faith or who are not regular worshippers of their faith, retired people, conservatives, and unsurprisingly, of course, people who don't donate to charities, and indeed non-voters. So this is, I suppose, somewhat the challenge, the division that is out there in society of people who are feeling more or less well represented by Canadian charities, and who therefore needs to be convinced a little bit more. And then what this plays into is levels of trust in charity, because again, an important thing to consider, not just the mood that the public are in, but to what extent they feel that charities can be trusted to be the solution to the problems that are out there in society. You know, as a charity fundraiser, you're in a very, very different situation than somebody who is, for example, selling washing machines. To what extent do you trust the manufacturer of your washing machine? Well, if it works, I trust them. If it doesn't work, I don't trust them. And I can tell because the washing machine's in my house and I can see whether it cleans my clothes and doesn't flood the house. On the other hand, for a charity, there is an element of going on faith. Yes, there are impact reporting. Yes, there is regulation. Yes, there's everything else. But fundamentally, you are making something of an act of faith when you're donating money to a charity, and you are trusting that that money will be well spent, will work towards the problem that the charity is working on. So it's hugely important. And the good news in that respect is that charities, generally speaking, are among the most trusted institutions in Canada. So here we've asked people, indicate by ticking the appropriate column how much trust you have in each of the bodies. Now, this is one of the questions, of course, in the Kahoot poll at the start, and those of you who remember will notice that you were broadly correct, so you can all pat yourselves on the back. 64% of Ontarians trust charities a great deal or somewhat. There's quite a degree of variation within that. So we know that the over 65s who are a kind of a core group here, and sorry, these numbers are a little bit confusing because these are based on the whole Canadian sample, whereas these are the Ontario figures. But the broad trend is that over 65s are more likely to trust charities. Those in the 45 to 54 less likely. Regular worshippers more likely to trust charities. And Liberal Party supporters more likely to trust charities as well. So that lines up, I think, with that group who said that they were more likely to feel represented by charities, also more likely to trust charities. Other institutions, obviously high up on the list there, schools, banks, police, Medicare, less well-trusted religious institutions, and the royal family, among others. But it's not as simple, of course, as saying that you trust charities in the abstract. We know that there's a great degree of variation in trust by different sectors. So here we've asked people, again, below is a list of different charity sectors, indicate how much trust you have in charities working in each of these sectors. And a massive, massive degree of variation here. So at the top of the list, cancer charities, 69% of the Ontarian public trusting organizations working in this space, and that is higher than it is for charities in the abstract. At the bottom end, you have charities working on LGBTQ plus issues, refugee and asylum seeker organizations, religious organizations. These are in the 30s, so less than half as well trusted by default as a cancer charity or indeed as charities in the abstract. And so you face very different challenges if you're working in this space. You will have to be either identifying your audience much more carefully when you're working on the less well-trusted scale of things, in other words, to find those people who do trust you and work with them, or else you'll have to do communications in such a way as to try and build up that trust a degree more. Whereas that is less of a concern if you're working on cancer, mental health generally. The pre-existing trust is already there. The other thing that we know is a great shortcut to trust is brand. Because what we've shown here is trust in charities in the abstract. We've shown trust in individual charity sectors. But where we know there is a big uplift in trust, again, even over and above that, is trust in individual brands. So you'll see down here, overseas aid and development, very low down the list, broadly speaking, not high levels of trust in charities working in this space in the abstract. But if you were to look at some of the major international brands, UNICEF, for example, there will be much, much higher levels of trust. And that is because of the level of warmth and engagement and experience that people have with individual organizations. Um, so particularly if you're working on some of the issues working lower down on this list, it is very important to invest in brand and to measure your brand and to know that the public are thinking of you as an organization and not you as a representative of this space. Third point then to consider is around the causes that people support and to what extent that is influenced by what's happening in the media, what's happening in news, the issues that people are concerned about at any time. And interestingly, the answer is not as much as you might think. So the things that people are concerned about day to day, month to month, year to year do change quite a lot, and we'll explore that in a minute. But actually, that doesn't necessarily always follow on to the kinds of charities that they support. In other words, if you say that tomorrow there's been some story in the news about children's welfare, you're really worried about it, you're going to tick a box on the survey that you really care about children's issues, it doesn't necessarily follow on that you will be supporting a children's charity as a result. And that's kind of a double-edged sword for charities. On one hand, it means you don't necessarily need to chase the constant news priorities, but also it means that sometimes charities will not benefit from an increased profile of the issues that they work on. And actually, the reality is that people build up the kinds of charities that they support and the kinds of causes they support across the course of a lifetime. Some of that will be things that have happened in the news and that they will have learned about, but much of it will be about their own personal experience, about their connection with individual brands, experience of the cause, and a range of other different issues. So I'll show you what I mean by that. In this question, we've asked the public in Ontario, thinking about the following issues, please select up to 5 that you're most concerned about. It's about 20 issues that we show people. We've only picked out some of the more interesting ones here. At the top of the list, as we find across most markets that we work on, quality of healthcare services. People are very concerned about that. They're very consistently concerned about that. It's, I think, a constant theme at the moment in many Western countries. Where we've seen some change recently, we've seen a drop in concern about climate change since 2023. So 35% saying that was one of their top concerns in 2023, down to 31% in 2025. We've seen a drop in concern about housing as well. So if we look at shortages of affordable housing to rent and buy, that's gone from 33% down to 26%. Drop in those issues. And well, where is that concern going, if you like? Actually, it's been an increase, particularly in concern about war and political instability. And that's, I suppose, not surprising with everything that's been happening in Gaza and Ukraine over the course of the past 3 years. That has gone from 18% up to 26%. I'm sure if we had data from 2021, it would have increased by even more since then. Children's issues also rising as an area of concern over the past number of years. So you might think, looking initially at this, well, that's worrying if you're working on climate change. That's great if you're working on children's welfare. But actually, people's favorite causes don't necessarily shift. So this is the pattern that we have seen replicated very consistently in our research of which, when people think about their favorite charities, what category do they fall into? See, children and young people and cancer tied for top position, health and medical next, then animals, mental health, homelessness, social welfare. You can see these don't line up necessarily with the issues of concern. And the other thing is that they have remained quite stable over the course of the last number of years. So while I think it is really important to understand what issues people are concerned about, to be able to tailor your communications, to be able to think about what's on people's minds when you are speaking to them, it's not necessarily the case that the public will be chasing the most media popular cause at any given time when it comes to supporting their charities. They'll have built that up over the course of many years. Um, and just another point about the causes that people choose to support. I think sometimes you can get into a double jeopardy situation here. So this is a question where we ask, it's from the UK, but I think we see similar results in other markets. Please indicate the extent to which you agree or disagree there is adequate funding in the UK for charities working in each of the following sectors. And again, we're showing a net here, taking away the disagrees from the agrees. And what we can see is actually the least popular causes, and these are the least popular in both Canada and the UK, more or less, refugee and asylum seeker organizations, religious organizations, overseas aid and development organizations. People are very likely to see these as well funded, and that there's adequate funding in place. It's not necessarily true the other way around, that popular causes are seen as underfunded. There's a bit more complexity there. But it's a real challenge if you are working in some of these spaces where not only are people saying, well, no, these are not one of my favorite charities. I'm not particularly concerned about these issues. They're also thinking that they're very adequately funded. So a real challenge, I think, and again, speaks to the importance of building brand when you're working in those spaces. So on this Giving Tuesday, I'll hand you over to Tim, who's going to talk a bit about the picture for fundraising in Canada at the moment.
Great, thank you very much, Cian, and hello everyone. So looking at giving in Canada, if we go to the next slide, Cian, I'm going to ask you to be my, I was going to say glamorous assistant now, but
Doesn't quite fit.
The first thing to note is that the public's perceptions of people who donate to charity within Ontario are very positive. So when we ask this question, maybe trying to tease out any negative associations that people might have with people who regularly give money to charity, you can see here the top 4 options are very positive indeed. They want to make a positive impact on the world. They're well-intentioned. They care about their community. They care passionately about the cause. Only lower down do we start to see perhaps some of those more negative associations. They are wealthy, kind of relatively neutral, I guess. They enjoy the recognition or praise for their actions. They are self-righteous. So very positive associations of people who give. When we look at the UK data on giving, what we saw during the pandemic was, as you can see here in this kind of lightly shaded segment, a real drop, obviously, in charitable giving. We kind of saw that across various different countries as well. But broadly, we've seen a recovery in giving since then. So in its most recent form in March of this year, about 2/3 of the public said that they donated to charity in the last 3 months. You can see that broadly, this is on the downward trajectory in the UK. So it used to be about 3/4, now sits at around about 2/3. Now, when we ask, I should add another kind of for interest here, 22% have volunteered as well, which is very similar to what we see in Canada as well. About 24% in Canada say that they volunteered in the past 3 months. Looking at the giving data in Ontario, and this is a little ringing a bell for the Kahoot poll at the beginning, you can see that it's around about 47%, 50% of the public who say that they've donated to charity in the last 3 months. So quite a bit lower than what we saw in the UK. And if I remember back to the Kahoot poll all those minutes ago, 51% of this audience said that they believed that 37% had given to charity, when, as you can see here, the correct answer is 47%. So maybe we're slightly too pessimistic about the proportion who are giving. And obviously this giving will take multiple different forms. It will be direct debits, it will be playing in a charitable lottery, it will be giving money at a cash collection tin, so a range of different methods. But you can see that participation is then broadly lower than what we see in the UK in terms of giving. The people who say that they've given, there's a little bit of correlation with what Cian showed earlier in terms of the people who say that they trust charity, and you'd expect that if you trust charities and charitable organizations, then you're more likely to give to them. But regular worshippers, Muslims, those who are affiliated or would say that they vote for the Green Party at the next election, those from a Black background, the more affluent in society, and the older in society as well. So you can see those are the people who are higher than the average in terms of givers. And then on the flip side of that, the people who are less likely to give are those on slightly lower incomes, not regular worshippers or have no religion, students, and those not in paid work, or the non-voters. So kind of similar to what we saw in terms of the trust profile as well for charities. Now, when we click through, the outlook for the coming 12 months is not so optimistic. So if we look at this dark blue line on the top here, this is the proportion of the public who say that we asked the question, do you think you're going to give more to charity in the next 12 months, less to charity, or about the same? And we take the people who say they're going to give less away from the people who give more, and we get the net score. And so the net for people who say they're going to give more in the coming 12 months is -2%. So based on this, and this is perception data, we would expect the overall proportion of people who are giving to charity to fall over the coming 12 months. And you can see there's a bit of a gap here in terms of the people. This is the peach line is looking back over the last 12 months. And that's a lot more, as people reflect back on their giving over the last 12 months, have you given more or given less? Actually, that's quite a bit worse. It's the net score is -14%. So many more people saying that they've given less in the last 12 months than given more. And again, kind of going back to the Kahoot score, this when you say the people who say that they're going to give more is 14%, and 51% of the audience, I believe, said that this data sits behind it, said, yeah, 14% say they're going to give more. So actually, broadly, the optimism question within that Kahoot poll, just a majority, 51%, you got that right. But it's not, this outlook is certainly similar in the UK. It's much more pessimistic in the UK. There's not a lot of optimism about people feeling like they're going to give more, because this reflects the economic reality for lots of people. The cost of living is higher, and obviously that squeezes people in a number of areas. Now, as this isn't the case in all countries, and this data and this chart here is taken from a study we did in Ireland with Irish fundraisers. And we asked, there was 176 Irish fundraisers who took this survey through their fundraising sector body. And we asked them, you can see here, in the last year, did you exceed your fundraising target, match your fundraising target, or were you behind your target? And in the coming year, do you expect to increase your target, increase your fundraising? Are you expecting stability, or are you expecting a decrease? And you can see that everybody is the kind of highest proportion, the highest square here is the fundraisers who have exceeded their target in the previous year and are expecting to increase their fundraising in the next year, so 34%. So there's quite a lot. It's this kind of sense that it's all doom and gloom is not shared by the Irish currently. So obviously a country like many countries in the West that are going through their challenges, with a certain country that borders Canada, where everybody's going through their difficulties, Ireland included, the UK included. But yes, this it's just an interesting to see actually where a charity sector seems to be doing a little bit better than in other places. To finish this this webinar, we wanted to look at consumption of media, kind of media habits, and people's reflections on where they're getting their news, where they're hearing stories, and how, whether or not there's a sense of polarization that we often talk about and hear about being reported. And there's some really interesting data on this. First off, when we look at the public's perceptions of social media, in Canada and more broadly, you can see here a sense of agreement or disagreement with these different statements. At the top here, 67% of Canadians say that I often come across unreliable information on social media. 61% were concerned about the removal of independent fact checkers on Facebook and Instagram. 60% worried about their ability to identify trustworthy sources of information online. I think this one's particularly fascinating. The majority, or over 50%, agree that generally speaking, social media does more harm than good. And 40% of the public think that the news I consume is different from the news that my friends and family consume. So we're starting to see quite a significant proportion of the public saying, yes, I have different news from those from friends and family. Now, broadly, there's not too much discrepancy with the publics in the US and the UK here. In the UK and the US, you can see that there's a slightly higher proportion who think that that they worry about their ability to identify trustworthy sources online. Maybe they're a bit more likely to come across unreliable information on social media, and that they think that the news that they consume is different from their friends and family. So there's kind of high levels of concern about people's ability to understand kind of and to trust what they're seeing. This was taken from March 25. This area is moving very quickly with the introduction of AI. This landscape is changing very quickly. Fake stories being introduced, fake images, etc., etc. So this is certainly something that we're watching with interest. You know, in Australia, they banned social media for under 16s, for example. There are changes happening in this field. But if we look at the breakdown of this final statement, I think the news I consume is different from friends and family. In Ontario, it's really interesting. The younger you are, the more likely you are to believe and kind of know that you're consuming different news from my friends and family. Whereas the older you are, if you're over 55, in particular over 65, you're less likely to feel this. So maybe the older you are, you're more likely to feel that you are in a news environment where people are getting the same news. Whereas if you're younger, you're more aware of how disparate and polarized the environment is. So some really interesting findings, I think, on social media here. And just for a bit of fun, to finish, we have here a YouTuber. Now I can see that his name is in the title, but I wonder how many people would have know who this individual is. His name is okay. We've got a few hands going up. This will be a chance for you to reflect honestly upon your own answer on this. He does crazy stunts, right? He does indeed. There's loads of thumbs going up. I don't know if it's 105, but fair play to you all. So this is Mr. Beast. He's the world's most viewed YouTuber. He's also done stuff on Netflix now. I have to say this data is from mid-2024. But you can see here, when we asked the UK public, I know him, I buy his chocolate, exactly. 88% of 16 to 24-year-olds in the UK know who he is. Only 4% of the over 65s do. Now, there have always been differences between the old and the young in terms of famous people and who we know, but this is an incredibly stark difference between the generations. And this is a guy who will regularly attract tens of millions of views on his YouTube videos, if not more. I think his Squid Games video was on 600 million, I think, maybe higher now, probably higher. But what's interesting about him is that not only does he do short, easy to digest YouTube videos, I won't say anything about my preference or what I like to watch, but we ask the public, what do you associate it? What do you think about him? Like, what do you know about him? And the top association is YouTube video streaming, 34%. He's rich, he has a business, 22%. But the third highest mention is giving. He's giving and philanthropist. He's generous, helping, and selfless, charity and charitable. Because Mr. Beast also does charity videos where he will say, we're going to rebuild this orphanage in South Africa, which was completely dilapidated, or we're going to cure blindness for 1,000 people in 24 hours, or we are going to rescue 500 stray dogs in an hour, or whatever it is. You get the gist. The first two of those are true. The last one is me guessing. But we watched it as an office, and in some ways, I think many people in the charity sector might say this is a problematic approach to charity. It feels quite outdated. It feels very kind of rich person coming in, solving the world's ills. But actually, for a whole new generation of people, this is what charity looks like. It looks like a rich YouTuber with a really big social presence doing charity. And so there's a lot of changes happening in the world at the moment. And this is, I think, a really interesting one to keep abreast of. But in some ways, I think you could say it's a positive that one of the world's probably most influential people, certainly for the younger generation, also has philanthropy and charity in his DNA, however effective you might think it is. So we've covered a fair bit of ground there, but just some takeaways for 2026. I think first off is that public optimism in the current time is very fragile. So we have to plan for volatility. I speak, yes, from currently coming from the Salisbury in the UK, where there's talk of a challenge against our current prime minister, because it seems like we've had a prime minister for 18 months, and that means that we need to change one, apparently. But clearly, in Canada, we obviously had the election, but there's a huge amount of political volatility with your neighbor at the moment. People feel like nothing is getting better, is a general perception in lots of different areas. We saw homelessness there, kind of a key area, where the sense of progress being made in areas is not as good as it could be. And so they really need to see that you're making a difference. So that's a key kind of recommendation for charity communications in 2026, is that show the progress that you've made to make people believe in the progress that you can make. Favorite causes don't move with the news. So you have to invest long term in building love for your brand. It's the way that you can kind of outgrow your segment, if you like, your charity sector. Giving is level at best. So you diversifying income is a priority. It's absolutely kind of one of the very relevant to today's hosts. I think there's many ways to make an income for charity, and that's absolutely important. I think also on the giving, why is the overall level of giving so much lower in Canada than it is in the UK and in Ireland, actually? And that participation could be and should be higher, I would argue. It's a similar level to what we see in the United States. Around about 50% of the public saying they've given to charity in the last 3 months. A broader base of giving is obviously good for the sector, and I think it's good for society as well. And the media landscape is fragmented, finally. So meet people where they are is absolutely on brand for this. So we have to engage with these new influencers, the new world, the Mr. Beasts of this world, the channels that they're on. However much we may not enjoy watching the content, we have to be there. And on that note, I'll open to questions.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Cian. Again, just a reminder for folks, if you want to use the Q&A feature in Zoom, it's just down at the bottom. You can ask some questions in there. I think there was a couple in chat as well. But I've got one to start things off, if you don't mind. So a recent survey by the Ontario Not-for-Profit Network found consistent trends, and we're wondering if you have or have seen similar trends in other countries. So for example, charities and not-for-profits here have experienced increasingly higher demand for services, resourcing and funding not meeting the demand. the majority of those that surveyed had to cut back on services and programs due to resource issues, so volunteers, staffing, resources. In addition to that, 50% of the charities reported challenges with retention of paid staff due to burnout, and that recruitment of volunteers, although it seems to be improving since COVID, is still really difficult. What's your experience in other countries and jurisdictions, and what does your research show on those trends?
Yeah, I think it's very familiar. You know, you hear can't open the charity sector news any day in the UK without hearing more redundancies, more cutting back on services, more organizations being pushed right to the brink in terms of their ability to deliver services to their beneficiaries. And resourcing and funding is an absolutely core part of that. I think in the immediate sort of post-pandemic period, there was huge pressure on retention of staff. Um, I suspect that has become less of an issue, but not in the way that you might hope, because you know there was just less labor market strength, and particularly in the charity sector at the moment. So the UK is pretty gloomy at the moment, as I think you know that lines up with what we saw in the where things are going question. So Ireland is maybe a little bit different. There is a bit more government money floating around, frankly. There's a sort of a large corporation tax boom there at the moment, which is sort of easing some of this. But I do wonder whether if that were to slip, there wouldn't be some underlying problems of a very similar nature. So yes, it's all too familiar, I would say.
Definitely. And I think on the volunteering side, I think it links to governments feeling incredibly tight fiscally, having to borrow more, having to service that debt. So in the UK, one of the trends that we're observing with volunteers is the number of local governments, local authorities looking for volunteers to run services. That seems to be increasing, and therefore the pool of volunteers has got even more competition for that group. So running your local library or local park, for example, is all becoming volunteer-led, which means that those charities that were relying on those volunteers, you know, running your local theatre, everything is there's local government is looking to volunteers to run that, and that puts even more pressure on charities as well.
Maybe we can also take a question that was popping up because we are here with the OCGA. It's not necessarily about your research, but we'll get to that. So thank you so much, Tim and Cian. But there was a question, so maybe Richard, you can answer, and I can also answer with my background and our ambition to start a lottery, a charity lottery. Do bingo players play bingo because they like to support charities, or do they because they like to play bingo?
I don't have any fancy charts to show you like Cian and Tim do, but the charitable gaming in Ontario, and specifically bingo in our charitable gaming centers, you know, in a very busy gaming landscape, it is the only real gaming that has a direct funding for charities. Creating that knowledge of the customers to understand that when they're playing bingo, that they are supporting charities. It's an ongoing effort, but I'm very happy to say that through the work that we've done at OCGA with our brand Charitable Gaming Community Good and some really great stakeholder engagement, that's improving. You know, again, if I had a chart, I would show you the upward trend on that awareness of the impact of charitable gaming and the fact that customers are supporting charities when they're there. I see in the chat as well that, you know, it also depends on the interaction in the gaming center and the volunteers and the charities that are there. That's an integral part of this, and having that the direct funding model, where here in Ontario we have charities providing volunteer resources in the gaming centers to be able to generate those funds and having a presence in those gaming centers. It's really critical, and it's critically important for us to have that. And the roles of those volunteers and those charities and creating that awareness is a big part of that. So I would say yes, it's not perfect. It's a constant work in progress, and it's definitely improving, if that helps answer the question.
Thank you. Maybe briefly about a postcode lottery that we would like to launch. There is the community playing together, winning together, because you play with part of your postal code. So if you sign up, you win with your neighbors and the money flows back. But to be honest, it's also always a matter of you want to win a nice prize. but it's always a good feeling, of course, that money flows back into society as well. But back to your presentation, there was a question I noticed in the chat that was arts and cultural. Has that been missing in your research as a category?
It's a category we need to add in. We tend to separate it out and kind of do separate research on the arts and culture side, because of the favorite causes we see as being more directly linked to those core fundraising asks from the public. But I think it is something. I've had another question about that that I think we should add in. But we have got separate research on that that we'd happy to share if anybody was interested.
Yeah, maybe more in general, maybe Richard, you can also look for another question in the chat, but there was also, is there data available for the past 12 months and not only 3 months? I believe you have a lot of data available. So perhaps if anybody joining today has some specific questions, we can look into that later and see whether we can be helpful of providing some more information.
I've got a question from the chat. This is in relation to kind of these third-party fundraising avenues like a GoFundMe. And so the question from a gentleman from Ottawa in Canada, we have people are often asked to donate to an individual cause via GoFundMe. Those bleed off available charitable money. Do you have a GoFundMe type activities in the UK? Is it a growing concern, I guess, as I'm adding on to his question, is it a growing concern that there are these, it kind of ties back to organizations having resource challenges and actually sourcing out fundraising companies to help them? Is that a trend?
It's definitely one. Yes, and actually, we tested 2 ads in our research. One was let's say a Canadian Red Cross social media post talking about the need to go to a specific part of the world to support people there. And then we tested an ad that we did, like a post that we developed from an individual saying, I'm going to go there myself and I'm going to kind of take these things in a van, or I'm going to do these things on my own, and kind of saw what the response was to those 2 ads. Which do people prefer? Broadly, people prefer the charity ad, but what was striking was that younger people were quite interested in that individual's appeal. And so we're seeing this more in terms of individuals asking for kind of support with their healthcare, support with their children's healthcare, kind of bypassing charities. We call it kind of disintermediation, a trend, like bypassing charities completely and just speaking to individuals. And technology is certainly enabling that. Yes, we're seeing it. Yes, we think it is taking away from the traditional charity structure. But at the moment, those core charity audiences and givers are less interested in it, but it certainly seems to be appealing to younger audiences. Yeah.
Over to you, there's a question about the postcode lottery in the chat on explaining the charitable opportunity coming in the spring. I'll let you take it.
Happy to do so briefly, and there is more information also on the website of the Canadian Postcode Lottery Foundation. But in brief, this is a lottery format, a charity lottery format that was set up 35 years ago in the Netherlands. And the basic is that people sign up. It's a subscription-based lottery, and you get a ticket number based on your postal code. So we have also been working already with Canada Post to make sure that we have postcodes. So part of the postal code will be used with an extra lottery code to it to have equal chances throughout the province. So when you sign up, there is, of course, a prize plan every month, so money to win and other prizes maybe in the future. But when the notary draws a certain postcode, everybody who signed up shares those prizes. That's the idea. It's called Postcode Lottery, and indeed you can sign up once we have finished up with this webinar today. And we're happy to keep you posted on that. And I did see also a question about are direct mailing still worthwhile? I don't know whether there's data available. I know something we work with direct mailing still a lot, but maybe Tim, Cian, is there something to say about this fundraising communication?
Yeah, I know I would be more familiar with the situation in the UK, but certainly it's an enormous part of the media mix for charities there. You're probably talking over 50% for a lot of organizations in both the UK and Ireland. And yeah, it can be hugely effective it just relies on a number of different things. So, having an existing strong brand is really helpful, and a brand that is developed outside of direct mail so that people, even think to open the letter. They don't just throw it in the bin as spam. Um, Targeting your audience correctly. I mean, typically it's not rocket science. People send it to the wealthiest households, and that often works well for them. And then obviously the execution of the pack as well. And there's a huge amount of science that goes into that, and testing and everything else. But a decent agency will be able to advise on that kind of thing. But I would say yes, direct mail is absolutely has potential. It doesn't mean you're going to see a return immediately on it. If you're an organization starting it from scratch and nobody's ever heard of you, but there is a lot of potential there.
Thank you. Well, being mindful of the time, Richard, if you allow me, maybe we could close off. But I do see a question from Crystal Burns about hard time recruiting volunteers in any capacity, but also for the bingo halls. There we have organized actually 2 previous webinars that can be found on recruiting, retaining, engaging volunteers. So maybe if you have some spare time, you can rewatch those episodes from the past. And well, again, if there are any questions, please reach out. And I would like to turn over to Lynn Cassidy, Richard's colleague, for some nice closing words. And thank you so much, Cian and Tim.
I'd really like to thank Cian and Tim for a very informative presentation. I think that a lot of this information actually will be very useful for charities in terms of long-term planning, but also in terms of developing a strategy around your fundraising campaigns. We've been partnering with Canadian Postcode Lottery Foundation now for the last 2 years and bringing these interesting webinars to our members. As Judith said, you can find them on the website if you missed out on the previous ones. And we're very excited about the possibility of the Postcode coming to Ontario to offer yet another fundraising means for charities. Judith, a huge thank you to you and to Marianne McKenzie, who's the president of the Canadian Postcode Lottery Foundation, for your partnership, for sponsoring this event, and for your support of charities across Ontario. Thanks so much for taking the time today to participate. Have a lovely day, and any questions, please, you can forward them certainly to OCGA or through our website. And I believe Nikki's going to throw up the QR code for Postcode Lottery so that you can find more information about the Canadian Postcode Lottery Foundation. Have a great day.